Welcome in to the Bite Me podcast. Little fair warning here now, people. Tell your significant other, because we're going to talk about your significant others right out of the chute, to go to the other room. Tell them to go to the other room, because there's going to be no holds barred. We're going to be very complimentary, and we're going to be very honest about it as well. This is the Bite Me podcast. I'm John Lopez. Captain Dean Thomas has already got a bleeping grin on his face.
Are they going to listen to this at a later date?
I don't know. We'll find out. Captain Caleb McCumber is with us as well. And Captain Scott Knoll, under the weather. He came back sick from a hunting trip, so I don't know if he got some bad. By the way, Dean, I just finished the last of the venison sausage you gave me. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Do you do that yourself?
The smoky links I had done at Clayton's Meat Market over in Portland, Texas.
Well, they do a really good job.
Was that jalapeno cheese venison?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was got the last of it done.
And my freezer is bare right now, man. I'm going hunting tomorrow. It's time it was perfect timing.
You know where to find me. This is the Bite Me podcast. Of course, let's get this out of the way and get right to it. Got a lot of great topics. Many from our listeners, which is what we love. And you can always contact me at Lopez on Sports on Twitter. Direct message me on Facebook. We got 10,500 and something people on the group page, and you can join if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. I always talk about Podbean. And the reason I do that is because we host it there, and that's where we distribute it to iTunes, Spotify, everywhere else. Excuse me. And then you can get every single podcast ever made.
You burping up that sausage?
I think it was. That was my post-show snack. And man, it's just as good the second time. It's just as good the second time when you eat it. But that's neither here nor there. Like I said, do all that stuff for us. We will love you a long time if you do that. Well, let's get into it. That's me snapping my papers here as I got the rundown already. And the topic is the pros and cons of fishing with your significant other. That's right. Now let me explain this a little bit. I'll give you mine first. Jan occasionally listens. I'm sure she'll get back to me on this, but this one came from my little brain because we were out this weekend doing some fishing, of course. And both days I fished with my wife, Jan. And one day I saw Dean out there fishing with his better half, Carrie. But some certain things, we got to be honest here, man, because I'm going to talk about the pros first. Okay. The pros of fishing with your significant other. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a her. It can be a him as well, that it maybe isn't as into fishing as you are.
Did we just get inclusive?
We got inclusive. Yes,
okay.
we were all totally inclusive. So here's the pros for me, and then I'm going to toss it to Dean next because he already was grinning about this topic. It's awesome. Number one, it's awesome that she's into it. A lot of people know the story. If you don't, she spent probably the better part of 40 years not fishing or just reading a book on the boat. Got into fishing a couple of years ago. Now she's all about it, which means number two, another pro. I love telling her things about fishing, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, telling her about birds. She's like me. She loves all kinds of different birds and what's what. And the best part of all, I don't have to worry about buying crap anymore because I'm buying stuff for her as well. Dean actually saw some of the many topwaters I changed the hooks on.
She's got her own little tackle box.
She's got her own little box full of topwaters. Now, the cons, okay? These are my cons. Wait
a minute. That was a short-ass list of pros for you.
Well, there's more. It's three things, whatever it is. This is an example. Cons. Now that I look at it, it is a longer list on the cons, but oh well. I don't need to talk about whatever gossip is going on at her work or with some of her friends or who's doing what. Or who's this or that. We get on the water to avoid gossip. And by the way, talking is awesome on the boat. You're just shooting the bull with your buddies, but she talks a lot. Sorry. And another con, I've been doing this for 50 years, probably 35, 40 years with my own boat. And I'll be damned. I start turning somewhere and she questions, is it too shallow in there? Or she'll throw something and get something of a problem with her reel. And she goes, the reel isn't working. No, the reel's working. The reel is working. And this is my favorite one. And it's actually kind of cute. Anytime we go through some chop, anytime we go to the jetties, she pulls out a life jacket. She pulls out a life jacket and has it in her lap. Like, just better be safe than sorry.
I've ridden on the boat with you, John, and I get it.
I was fixing to say exactly the same thing, man. You beat me to it by half a second. Yes, John. I was looking for the life jacket when I was riding with John.
You were not. I'm extra safe. All right, Dean, I'm gonna start with you, and we'll get the studio audience here. By the way, we are streaming live on YouTube. We do that every Tuesday, and then post the podcast for everybody to listen to on all those platforms. Dean, she's in the other room. Pros and cons.
Man, I don't even know where to start with fishing with my woman. First, it's fun. Enjoy it. I love it when she goes with me. Very entertaining. And she fishes good, man. She fishes hard. I mean, she stands up there and she will cast as long as that boat is drifting. But the funny thing about her, and it's interesting that you say that Jen asks you questions about this and that. Carrie don't want to hear a damn word out of me about the tide, the moon, the water, the nothing.
Oh, she loves that.
Oh, Carrie's like, I don't want to hear none of your guide talk. And when she says, just tell me if we're moving. She's like, because she's up there fishing and she don't want to hear me analyzing shit. She's like, are we moving or not? Because she starts to spool up her line and it's like, are we moving or not? I mean, she don't want to hear my analysis of the situation. But I mean, she fishes good. She cusses at every fish that she misses that would make Caleb blush with the word that she can put together. And it was so that just the other morning, when we were out there drifting alongside each other, man, I caught some good fish, man. I just kept getting blowups. She could not get a hit. Oh man, she was frustrated. And I mean, I get a kind of laugh out of it every time I get another blow up. She's letting me have it with new combinations. She puts cuss words together in new ways, man. That's
not a con. That's a pro.
Oh, that's pros, of course. She's just fun. I mean, she's entertaining. She's out there. She fishes real hard. If there's if the boat's not moving, she's up there casting. She never quits. And the cons, really ain't too many cons to it. I like to watch her because when she's up there reeling, her booty shakes a little bit, like a sharpener. Remember when girls used to go to pencil sharpener back in school, and they sharpen their pencil, think. Yeah.
Well, that went to a weird place.
That's well, I mean, why do you take your woman out there to fish with you? It ain't.
Might as well enjoy it.
I mean, I don't know why anybody would see otherwise.
Caleb?
Well, I'm real happy for y'all, but I can't think of a worse thing on the planet to do. She gets seasick in the harbor. About once a year, Cade will browbeat her into come go fishing with his mom. She'll catch one fish and go, all right, I caught it. Let's go.
We're done.
I used to fish with buddies that took their girlfriends all the time. We were always late because they had to get their makeup on to go fishing.
Yes.
One of them forgot she was wearing waders, and they weren't her waders, and peed in them.
Oh.
Again, happy for you guys. The hanky-panky thing ain't even going to happen on the boat for me.
Yeah. Well, when I am fishing with Carrie, we ain't never went early.
She said that the other day. I was ready to go 6:30. She goes 7:30.
No, she ain't never seen the sunrise out there.
See, I could fish with Carrie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the funny thing is, you mentioned the bathroom and the waiters, going to the bathroom and the waiter. I don't understand it. It's a genetic thing. Jan can go on the boat for 6 hours and never go to the bathroom. And when we get back, like 20 minutes. So like she'll pee for 20 minutes. How do they do that? We just I don't know how they do that.
I haven't met one that goes more than 20 minutes without peeing.
Really?
No, never. I mean, I'm not even women I don't know that are just on my boat. Like, I don't mind. You can dangle all you want.
Sure.
But
no, I've had that. I've had that on my boat as well. But she's like, nope, not gonna do it. Not here. I'm like, good Lord, how can you survive like that?
If mine sneezes, she'll pee her waiters.
And actually, Tyler did a pro and a con. We got several coming in here on the live feed. The pros is you get to go fishing. The con is how much time do we have here? Oh Lord. Like, are we moving? And then of course, Rex says, getting thrown out of your routine, loading up, getting set up, asking why this way. Again, Jan's interested in that. So that's a pro for me.
Man, when we show up, Carrie grabs the rods. She loads the boat. She does. I just kind of sit back and, she's good. I don't know, but we're still in the honeymoon stage too. We're still like on that. I guess that'll maybe fade away someday. But
you've been together a while.
I probably ain't gonna live that long anyway.
To put it into context, Dean, mine got seasick in California Hole.
Are you serious?
I'm not joking.
So does she get motion sickness in the car? Does any of that bother her?
I don't think so. I think just hanging out with me makes her sick.
Well, that checks out.
People ask her, how do you deal with a husband that's gone all the time? And she doesn't really seem to struggle to answer that question.
He's gone?
When he's home, he makes me sick.
The only complaint she has is when I'm gone, the internet goes down frequently, and she hasn't quite learned yet how to unplug and plug the router back in.
Yeah. Have you tried unplugging and plugging it back in? It's interesting because we've got some great stories. This has never happened because she just refuses to do it. But of course, the all timer is when you're at the boat ramp and she's pulling the boat out. Inevitably, there is going to be a yelling match. There's going to be a screaming match about something somebody did wrong, either him or her. It's the boat ramp thing is always entertaining,
particularly in Rockport.
How so? You just see more there?
Yeah, there's just people like to yell at Rockport.
Hey, yeah, you can just park in the parking lot and get jumped.
All you gotta do is go eat.
No, man, at Com Brown Harbor, I mean, of course, you get all varieties. You get guys that are good, and then you get husband and wife teams and all that. The dude that is the most entertaining is the one who is not afraid to yell at his wife in front of 100 people, and she's trying to back up a trailer, which she's never done before in her life. And everybody's looking, the pressure's on, and then this dude is out there just yelling. That's good. And so for those that want to be entertained, Con Brown Boat Ramp has a live feed camera. You can sit there and watch it from your living room. You can watch it 24/7 of people getting crazy at the boat ramp. But that's another one. That's another reason to hang your boat in the marina. You don't have to. You don't have to deal with that. But there's a lot of people that just refuse to back up and.
Yeah.
Since we're being all inclusive here, I'm going through my bank, and I can't come up with 5 dudes that I'd prefer to fish with.
Can you come up with one?
Me and Little White Dog. I like fishing with you, Dean, because you make me feel good about my skills.
Oh man, that's a shot. That's a shot. I thought Parkoff had it nailed. That the difference between us and Dean is clearly Carrie is within earshot and Dean is terrified.
She just walked through the room, but she had no idea what we're talking about. She came in at the end.
But I mean, we're not altogether forgiven here. I'll give you an example from this weekend. So we were fishing near a reef, and it was a rock reef, and I was, cozying up nice and close to it. And I decided, well, let's just go right over the reef. She goes, that's too shallow, isn't it? I said, no, we're good. We're good. I hear the scratching on the bottom. Like, well, maybe not. Let me go ahead and back up a little bit here and go somewhere else.
So I have a question for John, since John likes to ask all the questions. So here you are. You got your lovely bride out there on the boat with you, and you catch her trout.
Well, she had an opportunity. I'm always fishing from the back of the boat. I'm always on the back of the boat when she's fishing, 100% of the time.
The boat was drifting backwards.
No, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. And actually, that's a good transition to some real fishing talk here. Not that wasn't, but Terry,
and that's another one you didn't want to spend much time on. So John has his lovely bride on the boat. She's out there being all enthusiastic,
big time.
And here comes John. And the reason I saw you do this before the last time we took Jan out, and our mission was to get her that big red on top water. What does John do? Bam! Casts right up in the front of the boat, catches her fish.
I was not on the front of the boat. I'm always on the back of the boat.
You were at the back casting to the front of the boat.
I was not. That's what Caleb
However it happened. But it's just look, there just seems to be a trend developing here. Yeah, happens again. If you want her to keep fishing with you, you're gonna have to let her catch a big fish next time.
She did. She caught another red on a top water. But that actually leads to a topic that I got. Perry asked, John, we need details on that big trout. Well, actually, just for background, that those didn't see the post I made. Just for background, I caught it was about I measured it. It was about 29.25 inches, over 8 pounds, trout. But it leads to a topic, and then this is where I want to start with Caleb. Because I think you're gonna have some good stuff on this, Caleb. So just background, and that's the biggest fish, the biggest trout I've caught in probably 3 or 4 years. It was a monster. It was nice. You can look on the Facebook page to see it, and it was a lot of fun. Caught it from the back of the boat, for the record. But anyway, we were drifting, just drifting this one area that I liked a lot. Bait, the whole thing, everything we talk about on the podcast was there, and I caught about probably just under 23-inch trout, Caleb. And I went, whoa, that's a good trout. And, cast about maybe a good 15, 20 minutes later, caught about a 24.5, almost 25-inch trout. And I turned to Jan and I said, we ain't leaving here for a while. And I said, we ain't going nowhere for a while. And we ended up staying there about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And about 40 minutes later is when I caught the big monster. And there was some others mixed in as well. All good, fat, healthy trout. And it leads to the discussion, the question of, is one good trout like that, like a good, fat, healthy trout, enough to make you want to just hammer away at that spot for hours?
Oh, no doubt. That's why we call it the grind. When you're trying to catch a big fish like that, sometimes you're really lucky and they come boom, 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 boom. But a lot of the times you're pretty spread out in between them. If you talk to me or Pat and we say we caught 5 over 25 a day, or when I've been down fishing with Wayne and we caught a bunch over 25, we didn't just pull up to a spot and jump out and that happened. Is usually spread out through the course of the day. If you've got good fish in the area and they're eating, they're quite often not alone. We used to see that a lot, really before the freeze, in that you could go down a shoreline or something wading, or they would be 1 or 2, maybe 3 in a spot, and then a good ways away from that, 1 or 2, maybe 3. But here, since the freeze, particularly up in the Middle Coast, we see them grouped up more often. It's a group of 6, 8, 10 of them, something like that. But yeah, one big one, especially if the bait keeps working, if the tide keeps doing what it did, or the color streak, whatever you're on, if that maintains, you've caught a good fish there. And I would certainly hang out and. It sounds to me like if you'd have just drifted further and fished some more, you might have caught a 30.
Well, who knows? But Dean, you ended up. I texted you and brought and waved you over because what I've always said, Dean, about big trout, and I'm talking 25 plus. The first 2 I caught were 23 and 24 thereabouts, but it was enough for me to stay. What I've always said about big trout, Dean, is they don't travel in schools, like classic schools, like a good 18-inch trout, but they tend to be in the same neighborhood. That's how I put it. They hang out in the same neighborhood. They're sort of like Caleb said, just sort of spread out, but they're almost within earshot of each other. That kind of thing. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, just like that little honey hole that we were sitting on fishing that day. I mean, there were a lot of good fish that came out of there the previous day. Went back to it. We went there that morning. You caught a beauty. I caught several other really nice fish. And then we left. I mean, I was like, spent some time, went looking for a redfish. It was slow, went back to that area, boom, and the trout were still there. So it's, man, I mean, when you find them, you got to stick with them. And yeah, man, it can last for a couple of days. It can last for a week. It can usually last until something in the weather messes it up. You get some kind of weather event. But yeah, that out there where we have been fishing all through that area for the past 7 or 8 days has had, man, it's been loaded with some great fish. And you still, I still get creative. I go other places just to look to see if I could duplicate it. But I have been coming back to that, and that's where most of the fish have been. What's interesting, though, if you noticed, so the bait fish led us to that area. I mean, the mullet were just swarming, but the tide was high, and all of the mullet were on top of those sandbars. They were on top of those rocks. They were tight to the cover. And we were like 2 or 3 days behind the full moon, which makes me suspect that from probably midnight 2 to 4 in the morning, all of those bait were getting pushed up on those rocks. We probably missed something amazing. And then we come behind that, all those bait are packed up tight, because out in the open flats and the drift in the other, there were no mullet. I mean, they were all compacted on structure and safety. And with the tide being high, they had nowhere else to be. And of course, we found all the larger fish around that bait. And if you left that, I mean, there wasn't much to find. So, 3 or 4 days after the full moon, big high tide, all of that stuff is attached to some kind of structure and bunched up. I mean, they were
right on it.
Millions of mullet and bait fish just all jammed on top of each other.
Well, I told you once you got over there, I haven't moved. I mean, I haven't moved. I'm just waiting for the neighborhood to come by. But the one thing, Caleb, that I second guessed, and we all get greedy, is I was just using the same bait. By the way, Glenn Christmas asked, the real question was that on a popping cork? No, it was not on a popping cork. Although this one behind me is 30, and I caught that one on a popping cork. But either way, one thing I second guessed, Caleb, and I'm wondering for my own benefit as much as our listeners, I just kept throwing that top water and had some success. Like I said, probably 5, 6, really big trout. But as I'm going back and driving back to the marina, I'm like, wonder if I should have thrown something else. Maybe, since I wasn't moving, maybe something slow sinking, maybe along those. I was more tempted to change baits despite catching big fish. You know what I mean?
Maybe so, maybe not. What you did worked. If you're catching fish on what you're doing, why change it up?
Right.
If I get a couple of good blow-ups, I usually won't take off a top water. Dang sure if I catch a 23, a 25, and a 29, it's not coming off.
Yeah.
Too many times I've watched other people that weren't throwing the same thing not having the success, or I've changed it up. I've been fishing a lot of times where I'm catching good fish on top water, and I kind of get bored with it, or maybe greedy, or whatever you want to call it, and I'll switch over or something, and I don't catch them for an hour, and then I go back to top water and get another one caught in the next 10 minutes. So if it's working, I wouldn't change it up.
Yeah, mine was greed, but it was after the fact. I never changed it while I was fishing, but I'm like, I wonder if I should have thrown something else. Tyler asks here, Dean and Caleb, is this tide ever going to drop? Well, hold on. It could be tomorrow, probably about tomorrow afternoon is what I'm looking at, right?
Depends on where you're fishing.
Yeah, it's never, ever going to drop. It is going to be 2 feet high for eternity.
Well, you've seen the
glaciers are melting and the oceans are rising.
But that forecast has some big, strong winds, dropping temperatures coming from the north or maybe northwest. We were talking to Patrick about it last week. Patrick Gardner. Seriously though, what do you think about this front?
It might drop tides in like Mansfield area. It might drop tides in Baffin, Middle Coast. I don't think it's. I think it's going to actually stack water into somewhere like POC, which would result in Rockport and AP probably getting that too. Dean's more of an expert on that than I am. Middle Coast, Matagorda, Galveston. It ain't going to do jack all for us. It might maybe push a little bit out and kind of get us the water isn't over the boards of the dock. But this is because I've been watching it since last week. Last week, it was really strong out of the north on the first day and then just ripping out of the northwest on the second day. And it has slowly fizzled out to it's ripping tomorrow, but it's like a north with a little bit of east in it. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think it could level some stuff out. But I don't think it's definitely not going to dump anything. I don't think.
And it's only going to last for 12 hours. Mm-hmm. So Wednesday morning, looking at it right here, Wednesday morning, 21, 23 mile an hour north wind. Thursday morning, 9 and dropping to 6, turning to the east. It's just not that dramatic. Well, and so maybe someday, but this week, no, the tide is not going to drop out.
I'm seeing gusts to 40. And it starts.
So 23.
It goes from like you said, from like midnight until the next evening. But the wind direction sucks for what we're trying to do. It makes me happy a little bit. All y'all can kiss my butt because I have to go to South Dakota on Thursday and I won't be back till Tuesday. And I was bummed. Yeah. I was not going to be here for the tide dump or the chaos that ensued afterwards. But now it looks like I'm going to be back in plenty of time because it ain't going to happen till freaking Christmas.
Yeah, you going to fish in South Dakota? What's going on? Or North Dakota, you said.
South Dakota. A good buddy of mine invited me to go up there and hunt pheasants. And while I can't particularly say that I care about shooting a pheasant, being how I spent most of my childhood tromping through wet grass after quail, it seemed like a life memory for the kid. And so Dad's going to take a bullet and drive 19 hours and 19 minutes.
You're driving
to Chamberlain, South Dakota.
Whew, yeah. Baby.
And then, I'm looking forward to all the scenery in Kansas and Oklahoma. So there's that.
What scenery?
Yeah.
You can drive. We can go fast. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You can go fast in those areas.
No, Captain Caleb doesn't make the round trip flight to what South Dakota. That's not Bismarck. It's whatever the
Billings.
No, that's Montana.
Yeah.
Sioux Falls.
Yeah, Sioux Falls.
Yeah, Captain Caleb doesn't make round trip to Sioux Falls and back. That's not exactly on the Southwest budget flyer program.
Yeah, well, that's part of it.
And so the tide, but there's other variables to the tide. There's the moon phase. There is the time of year. Here we are. The winter equinox. So we're right in between the autumnal equinox and the winter equinox. We always have high tides. It's just normally higher than normal. You get a big old full moon and a south wind, which is what we had last week. Boom, tides over the piers. It stays there. And it's just like Caleb said, if it pushes some out, it's going to push it back to normal. It's going to push it back to, it's going to be lower, but it's not going to be low enough to make anything dramatic.
Right now we're at what the hell is this?
Yes.
And it could blow it down to this still sucks.
Yeah, that's high.
yeah, damn that's high. Hey, I went out drifting for trout to make a video for Angler U last couple days ago, and we caught 40 or 50 trout in an hour and a half. The fishing's still good, but for people like me that want it to be low so that I can sight cast redfish, and for people that are waiting that want it to rip out so they can find a bunch of good fish up in a drain, it just ain't here, man.
Yeah.
And we've been catching reds, but you can't see them. It's just a lot of blind casting.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely blind casting.
And another interesting thing, just on that subject for a moment.
No, let's go. I like digging in.
I hear a lot of people, a lot of my friends right here, they start, wow, the high tide, it's got fish spread thin. It spreads them out. I don't buy into that theory because I still fish a lot of the same areas that I would whenever it was 1 foot. I mean, I go back to those spots. It's just deeper. There's whatever attracts those fish to that area. They don't necessarily leave just because the tide came up. Mm-hmm. It's just you can't see them. It's going to be a little more casting. You're going to have to cover a little more water at a faster pace. But I don't buy it. I mean, I realize that the water comes up. And Scott argues with me on that a lot about they're back in the bushes and, they're back. And I don't know, Caleb may have something more to add on that to the marshes and places that he fishes. But out here on the flats of South Texas, it doesn't move them just because the tide is high and staying higher.
Well, you fish a totally different area and a style that me and Scott fish. Where you're at, they're already just scattered out through this grass flat. Where I'm fishing in particular, Scott is kind of in between me and you. Speaking of all inclusive, so whenever I'm fishing back lakes and he's fishing his little ponds and we just can't even get to them because they can swim back in the cow pasture, that's a problem. Whenever like if I'm wade fishing Matagorda, I'm focusing on, guts coming out of coves. I'm focusing on guts that have the little shell pads in them. Long story short, I'm kind of looking for depressions in the water because it's a little bit deeper. When the whole damn bay becomes a little bit deeper, then my chances are shot way down because they are just scattered out everywhere. Whenever it falls down, then they're in those low spots. They're on those reefs. We don't have the big grass flats. They just roam. They have areas that they're sitting around eating in. But me and Scott's main complaint is the things that washes them out, or not really wash them out, but pulls them out of those backwaters we can't get to, is the lower tides or even the normal tides. Right now, I trolled a back lake the other day, and I can see them and I can hear them, but there's no shot I can get to them.
But see, you're talking about redfish primarily,
even trout.
No, I know it affects trout in some areas, like Matagorda. Obviously, I fished there a lot, but I mean, it's by and large, I would say, if you would agree, redfish.
Well, no, one thing you will never ever hear me say is I wade fish for a redfish. Ain't gonna happen. I like red fishing because I don't have to wade for them.
Right.
The guts and everything I'm talking about wading in the coves or coming out of the shoreline. I'm there 100% for trout. Mm-hmm. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. But even if the trout aren't moving back into the pasture, they are indeed way more spread out. There's not a reason for them to be in that depression right now. There's when that depression is typically 2 foot deep, and now it's 4 foot deep, and everything else is 2 foot deep. I'm sure the math is screwed there, but the point is they scatter out and go all over the place. There's nothing congregating them, and particularly whenever. Like when you were talking about if you catch a big fish in an area, would you stay there? If I was fishing a drain that there was a reason for them to be in there and I caught a big one, heck yes, I would stay there. If I was just walking out across waist deep water across a flat and I caught a big one, I might fish another 20 or 30 minutes. This is Matagorda and move on. Now, the rules are totally different with Dean and the upper Laguna when I'm fishing with Wayne. We catch a big one down there on those grass flats. Then there's something out there. There's like a 3-inch difference in the depression or something. And we'll sit there and fish that all stinking day. Yeah. But again, there's a difference between drifting or wading just a big, pretty grass flat that there's fish cruising that grass and hunting, and fishing up here where you I've always said it, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people say it. Matagorda is a micro spot inside of a spot. You can go to Cain's Cove and you've seen it on Too Cool or whatever, and they say, hey, the fishing's really good here. You better know how to fish that 20 square feet here and 30 square feet there and everything to have a successful day in there most of the time.
Oh, trust me, it took me a long time. I would go down to Cain a lot, and I'm like, bam. And then all of a sudden you dial it in,
Well, so imagine fishing. So Cain's has the gut that wraps around behind the sandbar. And so they're typically be sitting there, right? There's some shell here and something there and a sand point here. But then you go into Cain's and the sandbar has 3 feet of water on top of it. and the depression is 5 foot deep, what is the point for them to be in that anymore?
Yeah.
Whenever there's typically a foot of water on top of the sandbar, and they don't really like to be up on it. That's my point.
I will say this, right now, because of the high tides, we've been talking about wade season and corky season and all that stuff. It's still drift season, man. Caleb was just talking about all those trout he caught. Dean, we were drifting. And oh, by the way, I kind of hesitate to say this, Dean, because I know it's not on the market yet, but I tried out a couple of those shootouts. They're badass, man. They're badass.
And they're going to be available soon. The e-commerce site is being built. The legalities of starting, in America, it's hard to just get an idea and say, I'm gonna sell something.
Yeah,
we're gonna make this thing and we're gonna sell it. Yes, we've created an LLC. We have. It's just, you make a huge investment before you ever sell anything. And of course, if you're going to start a business, you have to protect yourself. There's things that you have to do before you start marketing a product. And I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks. Actually, what I've learned is that it's expensive before you ever start making any money. But the shootout is badass, a ridiculously innovative idea that turned into an item that we put into practice, and it really does. It's kind of hard to say that such a simple item, a tool on the boat, could be totally reinvented and be a major improvement in several areas. The storage, the way it works, everything about it is pretty amazing. So, and I've had all the guys that have been on the boat with me fishing with them, man, they're like, everybody's ready to go. But it's going to happen soon.
Well, but around that topic is the fact that I was drifting a lot because of the high tides. And Caleb, it never ceases to amaze me. I've known this for decades, but you can drift, nothing. Then you drift through one spot and boom, it's wild. I'm guessing that's what you did. And it has something to do with what you were talking about. Maybe just a few inches of structure, a few inches of depth, whatever it is. It just boggles my mind that makes such a big difference when you get into them.
Yeah, and again, down there we are. It's nuts how just a depression that's a couple inches deeper than everything around it that'll happen at, or
And so even I was actually listening to Caleb as he was speaking.
Yeah, usually Tyler Z, you jerk.
Yeah.
Usually I drift off and think about cutting the grass and other things that I have to do this evening. But even when it comes to our flats, whenever you have a high tide, there are certain areas, whenever we're drifting and I'm explaining to people about, what we're fixing to drift up on, it can drop. The bottom can change. And when I tell people it's going to get deep, I say I start shallow and it's going to get deeper up ahead of us. And deeper could be as simple as 4 to 5 and maybe 6 inches. Yeah. And then that is where you find those fish. And just like John said, it's still drifting kind of summertime fishing because the water temperature is still 75 degrees along with all that. And a southeast wind every day. So, I love a mild winter, man. Believe me, this time of year, the end of November, the 1st of December is the best fishing of the year. And it's been quite pleasant. The forecast is going to turn tomorrow for a very short time. And then it's back to business as usual. Then we're going to have a south wind for the next 7 days.
Yeah. And, and so it's good advice for our listeners, about with the high tide. Maybe Caleb's right. Maybe it's just never going to cool off and the wind's never going to come from the northwest.
Here's a curveball for you. Quite often when I'm drifting East Matagorda and run into a little wad of them, I'll look at my depth finder and I've actually found a hump instead of a hole.
Oh, sure.
A hump sitting on top of it. But yeah, y'all stuff down there, man. I was screaming across the meadows with Chuck McKinney. It's been about a year ago. We went across the meadows and we get down towards Yarborough, and I don't know the names of all of them, but down there. And dude, it is a bad winter tide. It's like 3 inches deep. And I am sitting on his mid tower and I've got my back wedged against the seat and my feet on his console. Like I'm locked in. I look like the astronauts when they're about to take off. I'm locked in. And Chuck looks over at me and yells, "If you ever get in the bind down here, there's a deep spot up here you can jump in." And I'm thinking, cool, let's find that, please. And I see this spot coming up that looks shallower than what we're in, and I really start bracing up, and we go across it. It's like 3 inches deeper. He's like, "This is the spot I'm talking about."
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, it's a different characteristic down there, man.
It is, and I'm learning that even where I am right now. All right, so this is a fun question because of the question as much as anything, but it is a good topic that we got from a listener about rod sensitivity. So listen to the question here. I fish with my dad, who has an old stiff rod he's been using for years. Not sure what brand, but
Dean.
We both caught fish, and it was a soft bite. It had me wondering if rod sensitivity is just a good marketing ploy and how much it really matters. I'm not criticizing these expensive rods, just wondering how much it matters. Clearly, he had some, and his dad had the old stiff rod he's been using for years. But just wondering how.
And he had a soft rod.
And he had a soft rod. And he said it was a very sensitive bite. And he's got a second part to this. Also, does a slow tide affect the kind of bite you get? Because it was a very slow bite. So rod sensitivity, the old stiff rod he's been using for years versus the other one.
Your dad's just better than you.
I wish Scott was here today, so because he would be an expert on the old rod.
Old stiff rod?
No, just old.
Just old. It is interesting.
So there's other things that play into it. If you have an old stiff rod with mono or something on it, it's going to be a different experience than an old stiff rod with braid. However, my problem with older stuff, and I could name off some name brands right here that people are very proud of, but I'm not going to do it because we have people that sponsor our show. And my gripe is the old rods that are like soft and flimsy and I can't feel it. I would do better having a stiff rod that is cheap than I would a limber rod that's cheap. That's always been my problem with them. In fact, the rods that I use now are all pretty stiff. They're very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, even the high end rods that are really limber, and it's just my fishing style. So I'm looking up here because I'm trying to read this whole question over again.
Yeah.
It's my whole style is completely not conducive to a soft rod. I want some stiffness in it. If I'm getting a rod that I want to call it loose, it's usually stiff up about probably 60 to 75% of the blank, and then the tip is the only thing that has a lot of movement to it.
Yeah. So no, that makes sense.
That's my argument, though, is that if it's a crappy rod that's stiff, it's better than a crappy rod that's really limber. Because my dad, whenever I first started, perfect example. When I first started really getting into saltwater, I had a bunch of my dad's old crap, Falcon rods and stuff like that. And I never forget the first redfish I hooked up to. I set the hook and the rod bent so much, I kid you not, I set it and it came all the way up like between my ear and my shoulder, and the damn thing wrapped around and came the other side of my head.
The rod did?
Yeah. And I mean, this is just what then I would consider that an old not expensive rod versus what we have now.
Well, Gene,
so you remember, so it was man, what was the name of it? There was a couple of old classic rods. It was the Texas Popper or something popping rod. Yeah, so they were kind of designed for popping corks, and they had it was a very light action rod. And just like Caleb said, when you set the hook, it would bend to the handle. The entire length of the rod would bow when you're hooked up. And yes, you will not feel, I mean, if you're going to be lure fishing, especially, with soft plastics where you are fishing by feel, where you want to feel that tap, you're going to completely miss it with a soft rod. And it doesn't matter if it's old, new, or what brand it is, if it is very a light action, as when it hits, it just takes a long time to transfer that energy all the way through the rod, through the entire, or through the line to the rod until you feel it. I mean, there's just going to be a huge delay in the feeling to that. It's going to be very slow until you feel it. So, but a lighter action rod, I mean, and that's an extreme example where it bends to the handle, but a lighter action rod is going to load easier on the cast. So there's a balance for all that stuff. I mean, you want to be able to feel it when it hits. The perfect rod is going to load when you cast it, and it's going to act like a big spring. It's going to fling the bait out there. I mean, it's built into the action to make it cast further. If you have a stiffer rod with a fast tip, it might not sling a lure as far, but you can adjust your casting technique to make it cast just as far. It is going to cast differently though. But a medium action with a fast tip, you're definitely going to feel when they touch it.
Who's riding a bike?
Yeah, I don't know. Not me.
I heard the squeaking sound, but it's all right. Go ahead, Caleb.
Dean's hamster's getting off the wheel. I've used very expensive rods that were limber and missed all kinds of bites. I'll throw it out there that my casting championship came off of a 7-foot medium that's stiff almost all the way to the tip. I'm just saying, some people can load it up and kick ass.
I'm going to say that your championship was somewhat in question.
But you did use the term "your championship," so we'll move on with that. However, do I think part of the question was scenarios and everything? Scenarios is going to be, what are you fishing for? What lure is going to work effectively on that rod? And my answer is this: is it a bit of marketing? It can be. If you have different actions for your different stuff, you are certainly in a little bit better shape. But like in my particular experience, the Light Texas Wader 2 from Laguna, which is now improved into the Javelin, that is a almost medium action with a fast tip, and you can do anything you want with that rod year round. You can, hell, I've thrown popping corks with them. I personally wouldn't throw popping corks with a $400 rod, but I have. Top waters, corkies, plastic, 16th-ounce jig heads, half-ounce jig heads, quarter-ounce jig heads, redfish, trout. Can you do everything with the right rod? Yes, but it needs to start out as the right rod.
Well, make no mistake. Given my druthers, I love the rods that I have, and I love the new rods mostly because of the weight, and you can cast forever. But here's where I went with when I saw this question, Dean. Back in the day, and you and I are old enough to have done this with the older reels and the older stiff rods. I had my thumb on the line more. Now you don't. Now you just cast, and you can feel it on the rod tip and through the rod and all that stuff. Maybe it just spitballing here because I thought it was an interesting question. The old man actually had his finger on the line like we used to do. I don't know if you did, but I always did.
Yeah. I mean, I still have a lot of people that come out and fish with me, and as they are working that lure, they're holding it or they're feeling it. They're keeping their finger on the line. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. But, and of course, with topwater fishing, you're going to see it. You're going to see the explosion. It's coming. When it's time to react. When you're fishing subsurface, it is feel. I mean, you're fishing by feel, and every little tip tap. I mean, you'll miss a lot of fish. I mean, if they hit it and you don't react at the proper time, you're going to miss that fish. So being able to feel it, and I mean, new rods they're works of art. They're amazing. The technology that is built into a fishing pole nowadays, even in the lower end models, is quite amazing.
There's something to be said for that old man using that tool that he's used his whole life. My dad would take an 870 Wingmaster and kick your ass shooting skeet with your Perazzi or whatever. That's what they're used to. They know the feeling of it. One of the things about my dad that drove me absolutely bonkers is he always had a crappy rod, and I tried to give him a Laguna. He's like, and then he always had mono, and I tried to give him braid. And whenever a fish hits his line, he didn't even set the hook. He just picked it up and started reeling and caught the hell out of him that way. He could cast 30 feet
Yeah.
But what he had done his whole life just worked for him.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have a hard time comparing myself to an old dude with the tool he's been using a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I thought it was interesting. What about the second part of that? Does a slower tide affect the kind of bite that you get?
Can.
I don't know. I just kind of shrugged
it.
my shoulders. I said, I don't know. I think the bite is the bite.
Well,
Depending on what
there's a lot of variables to that question. I mean, none of these topics that we talk about on here, none of this is etched in stone. I've said that before. If there's an equation, if there was numbers you could punch in and say this is the answer to that question, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And the fishing game that we play out there would not be as intriguing as it is. So you take all of those situations and those circumstances and you try to figure it out. You know, you can break all those rules at some time. Generally speaking, and to me, it's the time of day. So if it's early morning and the crack of dawn and I'm out there and the tide isn't flowing, I don't give a damn. It's early morning, man. I always get excited for the first 2 hours of the morning. I always feel like it can happen. But if it gets to be 11 or 12 o'clock, and then it's just a light wind day and a slack tide, and it's the middle of the day, then yeah, I expect the bite to be very slow in that situation. So, I mean, there's a few variables mixed into that question. It's a tough one.
Yeah. But it had me thinking. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, no, it just like Dean said, it could be barometer. It could be the kind of bait that's there. It could be that there's a bunch of other fish around and they're having the "I want it first" reaction. Sometimes they slam it, and sometimes they don't. Hell, even in the winter, Pat and I were fishing. The water temperature was 47.
Ooh.
And you would expect the bite to be really weak and really slow, but we had to fish so slow that we were literally just dragging a corky on the bottom. But when they hit it, they take the rod out of your hand because, again, it was 47-degree water. You know, by all definitions, fish should be lethargic. But it was behind a front where they hadn't eaten in like 6 days. These were 8-pound fish that should have been. I mean, these were 8-pound fish.
So my question is, how many days behind the cold? How long had it been 47 degrees?
About 7 days.
Well, see, that's.
Or I digress. That 47 was actually on a warming trend. It had been in the 20s.
It had been cold, so they had already become acclimated to that temperature. So yes, about 4, 5, 6 days behind that, absolutely, you can get them to eat under any circumstances. You let that. So tomorrow, temperature is going to drop. Water, but. So, and then you have to talk about the range that we're in. So if it dropped to 47, it was probably in the 50s the week before that because the water temperature is not going to drop 20. I mean, it ain't going to go from 70 degrees to 40 degrees or the fish would all be dead. They can't adjust that fast. But if you have a gradual cooling trend, yes, they will continue to eat. If you have a dramatic drop at once, yeah, they're going to lock it up for 2 or 3 days. And so Scott's not here today, and we weren't going to talk about science because he's not here today. But my good friend, Dr. Bill Harvey, who was the saltwater fisheries director for many years, PhD, they did all these weird tests on fish. So they would stick a needle into their liver, pull the blood out. They would look at certain enzymes that the fish was creating or in their body. And so then they would change the water temperature that they were living in. Then they would do the blood test again. And they would actually calculate how many days it would take for that fish to start actually having a physiological change inside of their body that allows them to metabolize food. So while they're going through that change, they won't eat because they can't turn it into energy. And then whenever they do get it to the right temperature, that they will start eating again. So yeah, there's a rhythm to all of that.
Steve had a late growth spurt.
That's the reason I missed the show last week. That big yellow thing that lives in my office now. But he wasn't supposed to live past Tuesday night, and he set out the vet set out 25 dogs. He's been able to save one, and this one has a chance to be number 2.
Wow. What was it?
Man, it's hard to explain. Just my general luck. There's some super rare algae called Pythium that is primarily in Louisiana. And this dog who has never left my backyard in Needville managed to, if they drink it and they have a tear inside them somewhere, it'll invade and it kind of acts like a cancer. They call it swamp cancer in Louisiana. And it essentially swole his intestines shut. And so the vet had to open him up and cut a foot of intestine out. And then he's like, hey, while I'm in here, there's some weird looking stuff on his spleen, so let's chop that out too. But hey, I'm gonna give an unprompted, asked for shout out here. There's a doctor in Sweeney named Marsh Zychek or something. I call him Doc, but he's in Sweeney. He's Dr. Marsh, and this dude did what would probably cost me $10,000 in Houston for $2,000, and that included the medication, a case of special food, a 5-hour surgery. So and him and his wife are both vets. They're both Aggies. And so when you take your dog in, he's getting double teamed by the Aggies. And
how about that?
Man, Doc Marsh, tell him Captain Caleb sent you. He don't even know who Captain Caleb is. He just knows I'm Caleb, but he'll figure it out.
Shout out, man. That's awesome. I love stories like that.
Found you a swamp doctor.
Yeah,
he's a swamp doctor.
Yeah. All right, one more here before we get to what would Caleb do? What would Dean do? And this is another listener question, which we love. Don't forget to send them in. Send them to me. If you send them to other guys, that's fine too. They'll forward them, but I generally put it all together. I know y'all have talked about fishing streaks, and we have. A friend said he was hammering them on the fishing streaks. And when I went out there, there were some streaks of color changes and color changes that I came across, but I was just guessing. I caught a few small ones, but I just felt the whole time that I was guessing. When you see streaks, Caleb, this is Matagorda is and East Matagorda is famous for those streaks. And I love them. It's one of my favorite things to do, but it can be a little daunting, a little overwhelming. You see maybe 3 or 4. Sometimes you see wind streaks, but let's say they're classic color change type streaks. Do you just spitball too? What do you strategize there?
Man, if I know the area, which I do in Matagorda, and there's streaks over a particular region I know that holds fish, that helps. If there's bait in it, that helps. If I cast into it and I catch a fish, that really helps. But that's pretty. Pat and I'll be like, hey, there's streaks over Boiler Hump or something, or there's streaks over enter some random something. If I said it out loud, y'all wouldn't know what I was talking about anyway, because Pat and I don't speak normal language. We just have numbers and random names for things. But if there's streaks over an area that should be holding fish already, it's big. If there's bait in it, it's even better.
Know your bay.
What's that?
Know your bay.
Yeah, no, that helps a whole lot. I found new areas by fishing streaks though. I recorded some shorts this week that we haven't posted yet, where we were drifting streaks, and I caught about a little bit half-size basketball wad of shell and pulled it up and cussed it a little bit and threw it off, and then about 20 yards later I caught another one. Well, that's what puts a mark on my GPS right there, fish or not. I found another area that's got big chunks of shell laying in some mud. But bait primarily. That'll tell you a lot about it.
Dean, we don't. Well, at least I haven't had a lot of experience with streaks down south, but the color changes can happen.
Well, when you see that here, it's where the wind has been blowing, it stirred up the water, and then the tide's coming in, and you'll see where the bay water is meeting the tide water. And then as that gets kind of blown apart into pieces, then you'll get streaks of that mixed up together. And I mean, it's always worth a look. I don't get too hung up on that here. But it's where two bodies of water with varying temperature and varying salinity is going to meet. And it's kind of like a wall in the water. One side may be more favorable to the other, to bait fish. And I mean, you got to take a look at it, but I don't get too hung up on them. I mean, it's not something that I look for and I spend a lot of time. We get wind slicks though. I mean, we do get a lot of wind slicks where wind blows around an island or over a hump or something like that, and it stirs the bottom. And that's a good clue to give away that there's just a little contour to the bottom there. And I mean, that'll always attract me.
I do find down towards like the land cut area up here, we have like the kind of muddier water and green water, or we'll have like the sandier green water and the greener water. Down there, it's more just, it is kind of a milky looking area and then clean water beside it. And I've done really well fishing, actually not as much the transition, but they seem to be in that milkier area more so than they are in the clear area. But it's still, I would still call it a streak.
I always start there on the darker side and bring it to the clearer side. But that's just me. So catch us up, Caleb. You got an app?
I got an app, man. Angler U is an app for iPhone users. Google is being much more of a pain about it. But
really,
the app is live on iPhone, and I'm also able to send out push notifications. So we were going to have Captain Scott on the webinar. The webinars have moved to tonight, so we can hold these fools captive through Bite Me, and then give them an hour or two to go get something to eat, get good and drunk, and come back to the AU thing at 7:00. But tonight, I think we're pulling an audible. I think, Mr. Wayne Davis is going to be on there. Just a little public service announcement for you guys that haven't heard it, because it is important you know this. To get to the live stream, you're going to want to go in the communities. We have a community section that's pretty much just like Facebook. You're going to go to the community section. If you're a member, you can see the private communities. Private communities have live stream. You're going to click on that. But yeah,
All
no
right.
Scott must be sick, dude, because I texted him and Camille and said, hey.
No, he's sick.
He's sick, I think. I didn't get an answer from Camille, so I texted him.
Yeah, I was texting him about his old stiff rod if it was sick. And I didn't even get a reply to that.
No. Hey, you know what I did pull off this week, John?
What's that?
Yours truly has a sideline pass to the A&M TU game. And I feel like
not.
I do. And I feel like Lee Corso is probably going to want to interview me. And B,
probably not, but go ahead.
And B, I will refuse to take a picture with Matthew McConaughey if he asks.
God, I love you. How the heck did you swing that?
Man, I just, to quote Earl Hickey, if any of you knew who Earl Hickey is, do good things and good things will happen, John.
So how the heck did you pull it off?
Yeah.
I ask again.
Exactly.
Our homie Drew Solinsky, I take really good care of him, and he is over the Olson and Kyle Field. Yeah. And so apparently there's a worker not showing up, and it's going to be my job to protect the goalpost from co-eds. That is my job description.
What?
Yep.
Did he know who he was hiring for that job?
Whenever I texted him last night and I said, I'm wondering what all the peasants that are trying to get tickets to that game feel like, but I can't quite understand what it's like to be a peasant that needs tickets.
Yeah.
He might have gotten a hint of what he got himself into.
Yeah, probably did.
Yeah,
all right,
Perry
man.
Hallman's down here. Perry was gonna be posting on Facebook his cool season tickets, and I'm gonna be like, take that, Perry.
I gotcha. Perry had a nice day out on the water. I saw that on the group page, so don't forget to join there. All right, man. Big changes, big weather changes. We talked about them here, but it leads to the rest of this week and the weekend. What would Caleb do? What would Dean do? Dean, you changing your strategy at all during and after this big wind change?
Not until the water temperature drops below 70 degrees at least.
Yeah.
I still, if it hits 68 after this, I'll be the most surprised person anywhere. I mean, it's going to get cool for a couple days. Water temperature is still 76. That's going to be pretty dramatic if it does. I'm going hunting for a couple days. I'm going to let the wind blow. I'm back at it. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I'll be fishing up until Thanksgiving. And it looks like that's perfect timing for me. It don't always work out that good. I'm bailing out on the wind, coming back 3 days after, the week before Thanksgiving. Oh, man, that's an awesome combination.
I would definitely start out with the same strategy we've been doing.
The tide's up, and the flats of Redfish Bay is a 12-month of the year fishery. Mm-hmm. We stay on these same spots, all year long. The conditions change, the temperature changes, their attitude changes, but the fish are always there until the tide drops into the negative range below zero, where we are pinned to the drop-offs, the outsides, the cuts. the so-called drains. I mean, we have something similar to what when people hear we talk about drains, the marsh and those things. We have a much smaller version of that, little tiny drains, little breaks in the sandbars is what it really is, that is adjacent to a drop-off. But until that happens, I mean, we're going to continue drifting the flats. I'll start throwing soft plastics a lot more, rig weedless, just because you go slower. But, I mean, rarely do I change tactics until Christmas.
Caleb?
Yeah, no, I'm with Dean. I'm adding to what he said. Up here, I think the water temperature will get a little bit lower. It was 72 the other day. However, I think the low that I'm seeing, and I'm sure there's something at like 2 a.m. somewhere, but the low I'm seeing on Thursday is 62. 62.
It does go down
Friday.
to 47 up here. Now I don't know about there.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to do it on the coast. And then it's just climbing back up to the mid 70s. Drifting was good in Matagorda. It's been decent in Galveston from the people I've talked to.
It's going to be better when you get the shootout.
I would get my jollies Wednesday. It is nuking out of the north. I'm hoping it gets the water temperature down because that'll affect how fast the water will actually streak up and clean up. Maybe Thursday it'd be okay. Friday, between Friday morning and Saturday, about a little bit before dark is when I would get my jollies because it is supposed to be ripping out of the south by Sunday.
There we go.
Yeah. So, but
and our water temperature at the Port A jetties is 77 degrees right now.
Dang. God, dog.
So
and it's probably warmer since I was out there. It's been warm these last several days, but yeah,
it's on the
tide change.
Yeah,
not a big tide change, not a big temperature change. Just let it blow, let it settle out, back to business as usual.
Awesome.
I do see not this coming Thursday, but next Thursday on the forecast, I see another strong northern coming that is going to like almost as soon as it hits. I say that it's supposed to hit at noon on Wednesday, and by Thursday at 3 a.m. it's supposed to be 48 degrees outside. So if we can get that sucker to shift to the northwest some, maybe that one will do it for us.
Good deal. Well, hopefully Scott is feeling better in the next day or so. But you guys kicked butt as always. Dean, you have anything? I talked to Caleb about Angler U. I always like to do that. Anything happening other than you're finally going to get a venison, and I'm out of deer sausage, so that makes two of us that are happy.
I actually got a couple smoky rings for you still in there that we have to eat before the new shipment hits. So
I can help you with that.
We slather some OG sauce up on that hot link, and
that's how I ate them today.
I think I just talked myself into one.
You did. So all right, boys, you guys are fantastic as always. Listeners that were in here on the live stream, appreciate that. Of course, this is going to be posted ASAP, usually by about 6 o'clock. And there wasn't a lot of editing, I don't think, in today's episode, so usually about 6 o'clock on Tuesday as well. It's going to be
you don't have to edit out Scott's dramatic pauses.
He has a lot of dramatic pauses. If it's gotten to the point where I don't even have to have my headphones on. Caleb, you can probably relate to this. Like you see the little up and down lines on the audio feed, and he has a certain connotation. I mean, a certain inflection in his voice that goes, and then a big pause is coming and the line drops. So I'm just like, I'm just deleting them without even having to listen. I know it's a pause.
Yep, there's no. Yeah,
that's what he does. All right, boys. You guys have a great week. I'm already jealous of you, Caleb, for that pass. I'll be happy to protect the polls from co-eds as well. But we'll see about that. You guys have a great week, great weekend. Tell us how it goes. Ask those questions, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You guys, as I always say, catch them up. We will talk to you next time.
I always knew Scott was a sick bastard, but now he's using it to miss work.